Hello there, folks. We are just getting ready to go live, and I just want to check that all the tech side of things are working. But I think we're up and running. Welcome to a. Here we go. Perfect. We're going lovely. Love it. Welcome to today's Facebook Live. My name is Dan from Organic Digital. Great to have you on board. If you're watching this after the fact, thank you for joining us. Today we are covering the amazing and incredibly interesting GDPR and the new Facebook regulations as well. It's a minefield of information out there, and today's presentation certainly won't unravel all of it. What I'd like to be able to do, and just make sure if Ainsley, so you comment there, if you can just let me know if you can hear me as well. It's a minefield of information out there. There are so many people that are publishing articles about it, hence why I'm doing the same as well. But also, you've no doubt probably been getting emails from a lot of the apps that you use, a lot of the software providers that you have. Different companies will be sending you emails saying, hey, we've updated our privacy policy. We need to let you know about that. The reason why that's happening is because of the GDPR. So it's to what I'm actually going to do at the end of this Facebook Live as well is I've got a blog post that's about to go live. I just had some technical issues publishing it live, so I'm actually going to run through my Word document that I've got in draft there when we go through the different elements of it. So I will be publishing a link to that in the comments, but just for this Facebook Live, I just want you to give me your attention and try to take in the information. I've been doing this for the last couple of weeks in trying to delve into the GDPR, and I find that if you don't give 100% of your attention to the information, a lot of it can either go in one ear and out the other, or you can actually misunderstand a lot of it as well. So I just want to make sure that we are on the right track and that you're getting all the information in the best way possible. So the GDPR, basically it's come about because it's called the General Data Protection Regulation. It's not something that's just been sprung upon us. The law was actually passed 2 years ago. So it's not like we didn't know it was coming in the EU. The reason why it's just got so much coverage lately is probably from a combination of things, particularly Mark Zuckerberg going in front of Congress and Facebook's privacy issues that have happened around the Cambridge Analytica data breach, as well, a privacy breach as well. And so it's been a combination of a focus on data and people's personal online privacy that the GDPR has got so much coverage of late. So it is important though, because a lot of people don't actually realise, and probably one of the biggest misunderstandings is because it's an EU law, they think, well, it doesn't, if I'm in Australia or I'm in the US, it doesn't really apply to me because it's where my business is. But unfortunately, unless you're willing to put a block on European visitors to your website, if anyone from the EU visits your website, you're technically processing their data, and you need to let them know about that. And that is really the main part of the GDPR, is it's all about transparency, and it's come about because they want to give users more control over their data, which I think is a good thing, and that's probably a topic for another day. But it's important just to recognise that really the main aspects of the GDPR are just companies being more transparent with its its users and its potential customers, so they can have control over their data. Because there was a stat in a study recently that said that only 15% of online customers think that they have control over their online data, which is a pretty alarming statistic when we use so much of our life is consumed online, both from personal and privacy data, both to just also what we do throughout our day as well. So is really that's the basis for it. I'm actually going to flick you over to my other screen over here as well, and this is what I'm going to run through in today's Facebook Live now that we've made sure we're up and running. So thank you to those that are out there watching and letting us know that we're getting the sound okay. I'm actually going to grab this over here as well, so I can keep an eye on any comments. And if you do have any comments, I will revisit this, the actual comments at the end of once I've got run through the blog post. So just let me know and leave them there, and I'll get to them as soon as I can. That's some weird color issues. Okay, this Word document here. Firstly, I need to let you know that I'm certainly not going to cover everything from a from a GDPR perspective. And there are so many ins and outs, particularly when you're dealing with highly sensitive data. What I'm going to talk about today is how it impacts you from a marketing perspective, both from a Facebook and a Facebook advertising angle, and also your website and your online presence, your online digital presence as well. I'm only going to cover those couple of issues. I still recommend that you get legal counsel and legal advice, and the advice here today doesn't constitute legal advice. So I need to be clear about that, and that I recommend, and I've actually got some resources, particularly if you're in Australia. I've got some links to some recommended lawyers that are qualified in the privacy space and can give you actual legal advice. All I'm doing today is presenting the information that I've gathered over the last month or so around the GDPR and the new Facebook policies as well. So, there's a really interesting quote that The Economist published recently around the world's most valuable commodity is no longer oil, it's personal data. And it's incredibly important and incredibly valuable, not only to people, but also to companies. And that's really the basis of why the GDPR has come around. It's going to be implemented. If you're not sure when the date is come in, most of them said it, but it's May 25th that it will be implemented. So you've got 9 days between now and then to make sure that you get your house in order, because it will start to come into effect on the 25th of May. The regulation basically states, pretty simply, data shall be processed in a lawfully, fairly, and in a transparent manner. The reason why they've kept it nice and simple, and another reason why they brought this in, is because there was 28 different jurisdictions from all of the European Union countries, and it was just difficult to meet all of them. It was expensive, so they're bringing them all under the one banner as well. There are 9 key points to the GDPR. I'm not going to go into all of them because a few of them don't actually affect this side or this Facebook Live, and some of them are quite technical in their terminology as well, but you can certainly read the blog post after this and get the insights. And this is the language directly taken from the European Commission as well, hence why it's a little bit boring. The next part that I'm going to cover, and the reason why I've put this in the blog post and also want to touch on it in the Facebook Live, is some key definitions, because I'm going to refer to these terms throughout this video and also in the blog post as well. There are some key terminology that you've probably seen if you've read anything about the GDPR. The first one is the difference between data controllers and data processors. So what a data controller is basically they determine the way that that data is processed. So they're generally the principal party or the main party that's collecting the consent. So for most businesses, and you guys out there that are collecting email addresses, collecting leads, etc., you are the data controller. Now, the data controller has the responsibility to work with GDPR compliant data processors. So a data processor would be, once I've collected that email address for you to be able to get that free download or the lead magnet or sign up to a course, whatever it is, I then send that to my email provider, a MailChimp, an ActiveCampaign, Infusionsoft, whatever it is. They then process that data. So they take that email, they put it through whatever automations I've set up in those systems, and they send maybe the lead magnet or the download, or they just store that data and they process it for me. So data controller, the business, data processor, third party provider, app, MailChimp, Infusionsoft, payment processors, course processors. I've got an example here for each of them as to what the difference is as well. And then the next terminology that the next term that I want you to be familiar with is what's called legitimate interest. And this legitimate interest keeps on coming up in a number of different articles and resources out there to keep on reading. It's, to be honest, it's still a little bit of a grey area around legitimate interest. Basically, it refers to what the individual would reasonably expect their data to be processed at the time and the context. So, for instance, I've got an example. If you came to my website and I was offering a free download on Sales Funnel, for instance, there's often follow-up emails regarding that topic and explore it a bit further, and they're just to add value to that initial download. The person that signs up and downloads that sales funnel template would probably reasonably expect that they're going to either receive more information about it, or communications that they receive from me would be related to the initial topic that they signed up for, being Facebook advertising sales funnels. Now, if I was to then take that list and say, I'm going to email them about dog training, for instance. I don't know why I chose that topic, but I did. Then, as an individual, you would be right to question and say, hang on, I signed up for a sales funnel download. I don't want to hear about this dog training business. Why are you emailing me about that? So think of it as basically what they would expect to receive when they first sign up. The reason why legitimate interest is important is a lot of people will rely on that aspect when people sign up for something and then they send them more information about another product or a similar product as well. Basically trying to make that link between what they first gave consent to receive information about as to what you're then going to give them information about after that. You do need to note, though, that if you decide to rely on legitimate interest, you take the risk when you take that action. So if you are going to be investigated and you rely on legitimate interest, that comes down to you and your decision to do that. And you can't rely on the EU regulations, etc. So let's get into the key parts now that we've got the boring stuff out of the way, how it impacts your marketing. And there are some things that there's some main areas that it will affect you and what you're currently doing. So the two areas I'm going to focus on are your website and Facebook advertising. So for your website, basically to make your site GDPR compliant, it just boils down to making it transparent with people. You need to let them know what you're doing. You don't want to ask for information that you don't need, and you need to let them opt into you rather than you taking it by default. So what I mean by that are some examples that you might process data on your website. Personal data, such as forms and sign-up forms, registrations for events or webinars or downloads, maybe comments that they leave on blog posts and articles as well, down to obviously much more sensitive data such as payment information as well. But then there is also the data that you're getting from them without them actually knowing about it, such as if you install Google Analytics, that's tracking the user's behaviors on your website. If you install a Facebook Pixel, which we talk about a lot, then you're tracking the behaviors that they're doing across your website and putting them into a Facebook custom audience. We're going to talk about that as well. So the two key differences there is when you're taking data that they know about, so they're giving consent to, the number one thing is just don't take anything by default. So you can't have pre-ticked tick boxes to say, or you can't at the end of your form say tick this if you wish to not be added to our newsletter list. You need to give them the option to actually opt in. There's no more just asking for information for the sake of it and trying to just mine data so you can get some more information from them and use it down the track. So really this comes down to telling them why you're actually gathering that data. So if you are gathering their first name and last name, tell them why. If you're asking for their birthday, then tell them we get your birthday because we send out birthday gifts or coupons. If you have a field for phone numbers or something that they can be directly contacted on, tell them that, hey, we gather your phone number so we can get our sales team to follow up as soon as possible with you. It's really just explaining why they're gathering each of the fields with you. And they must explicitly choose to share that information with you. You can't force them to do it as well. Then the next part, from a marketing perspective, is your Facebook advertising. Just give me a sec while I just check the comments. I'm going to grab a quick drink as well. Okay, so Facebook advertising. The biggest thing is that initially affects you is if you use Facebook pixel. So if you use that pixel on your website, which you should be, then you need to be transparent about that to your browsers and what data you're tracking as well. So there are a couple of things from a Facebook pixel perspective, because the GDPR and the Facebook policy regulations are happening concurrently, and they are actually implemented within a day of one another. So Facebook have brought a lot of their policies in line with the GDPR, at least in the countries that it definitely affects those users. And you may have actually seen in some of your advertising accounts a little notification box saying we're removing some targeting options from European users on May 24th. So they're removing it before it's implemented on the 25th. And it'll tell you if you're targeting people currently or previously in your campaigns and how you can remove them. But they're changing their regulations as well to be more in line and bring the principles of the GDPR to users all around the world, regardless of whether they're in the European Union or not. The biggest one is in relation to the Facebook pixel. So the Facebook pixel, you need to... I'm going to go into exactly what you need to install from a cookie policy perspective. The other big thing that you need to outline is, pardon me, Facebook data custom audiences. So if you're uploading your existing data, so if you've got email lists, or you take, the people that have become customers and purchased, and then you upload them to Facebook to use them as Facebook data custom audiences that you can target, then you need to, you can rely on legitimate interest to be able to do that. But if they want to be taken off your existing email list and they say, I don't want to be on there anymore, then you also, if you've got a synced list over in your data custom audience, then you technically need to remove them from there as well. So you need to have a process in place that if someone unsubscribes and you've got that list uploaded to Facebook and you're targeting it with ads, that you need to remove them from there as well. I'm going to go into some resources and tools to automate that rather than being a rather laborious manual process. So steps to prepare for it across both website and Facebook advertising. The first part is you need to update your privacy policy. It's a pretty basic one to update the requirements from the GDPR. What you need to do, it's also just good business practice to update your privacy policy as well. It's a pretty simple step. There are a lot of tools out there that are that can help you produce a privacy policy that is GDPR compliant as well. I've got some of those in here for you as well. But there are some key areas that the privacy policy needs to cover. The first one is how and what sort of information you collect. So that's pretty basic. It's the bread and butter of most privacy policies out there. What personal data you collect, down to whether you use Google Analytics and Facebook Pixel, etc. Second part is what you do with that information. So as the data controller, as a business, you have a responsibility to deal with data processes that are GDPR compliant. So you need to make sure that you take steps that data is processed securely. And the third part, which will be the next step, is your use of cookies. So not the chocolate chip variety, but cookies are little files that are stored on your computer. And you would have seen them. They basically work same principle as Facebook Pixel, as Google Ads. You go to a store or a website online, you browse that particular product, then you exit off that website without purchasing a product, and all of a sudden you start seeing ads for it all around the web. That is basically the principle of cookies. So they cookie your browser, that then goes back to the advertising platform and then says, this person browse this particular product, can you show them that ad for that particular product on Facebook or around the Google network? And that's how that works. So cookies are the link between each of those. So if you use cookies and you are gathering that data, then you need to tell people as well. There are a few tools that you can use to make this process a lot easier. I've got 4 here. I have used, be totally transparent, I've used the IU Bender program, which is basically a module-based privacy policy. There's a free version that gives you most of it, but if you are using any of the advanced cookie programs such as Facebook Pixel and advertising and other tracking pixels, then you'll need to upgrade to the paid version. It's $27 per year. I think that's 27 US dollars or maybe euros. Can't remember. Probably would make sense if it's in euros. But yeah, I got the $27 option. They do, all you basically do is you go through and you say, what data are you collecting? What cookies are you using? It puts that all in information all together for you. You put in your business details, and then it gives you an easy option to be able to link to that privacy policy and the cookie policy there as well. The other couple of options, terms feed is another one. I went through to have a look at the price for that. By the time I added up all the tracking pixels and data that I collect, it ended up being $112. I'm not sure that was one-off or per year. I was like, that's too much. If you have a Shopify store as well, now apparently Shopify are actually bringing out some GDPR compliant features before, I know they're cutting it fine, before May 25th. So if you do have a Shopify store, then they may be able to help and may have an app to allow you to do this. Otherwise, IU Bender would work as well. Another one that I tried, which was a lot more advanced, to be honest, it didn't work for my website, but some people have recommended it around a place. It's called CookieBot. I've got all the links in this article as well, but people can have more control over the data that you got there as well. So the next step, which relates to these tools as well, and here we go. I'll switch over to my website now because I'm going to talk about a cookie policy and how you need to make sure that you are being transparent with the data that you're collecting in your cookie as well. So I've now got this cookie notice that will appear to my website whenever anyone comes. Tells them what data I'm collecting, what cookies I'm using, links through to my cookie policy. If I select that, it'll actually pop up. This is my cookie policy from IU Bender, and that then goes through each of the different cookies that I've got there as well, and then tells me where I'm actually processing that data as well and who the owner is. I'm going to put my information in there as well, so it provides all of that for me. That comes each time. It remembers me when I come back to the website, so it shows them once I've clicked close or I scroll further. That's the equivalent of me giving consent. So I don't need to agree to that. If all I simply do is just scroll down, that's the same as me saying, yes, I'm okay with you using these cookies on the website. So that's a really important one. If you use the Facebook Pixel, you need to also have a cookie policy under the new Facebook terms of use and their policies they're implementing on the 26th of May, that you use a pixel. The main difference being, and this is a really key difference between the GDPR and the Facebook regulations. According to the GDPR regulations, you can't gather that data from the cookie unless they actually give you consent to do that. So that consent is them scrolling or something like that. Once they've scrolled and they've agreed to it, then the script from that cookie can actually load. So when you first go through to a website though, generally all of that script loads automatically. So what GDPR have said is that you need to stop that script from loading first. Then when they give you consent, then you can actually implement it. That's a pretty key difference there. The difference with Facebook is that you don't need to stop that script from loading. You just need to be transparent that you're actually doing it. If people want to remove themselves, they don't want you to use that cookie, then they can actually get that data from, they can go into their Facebook privacy data and be able to remove the access that you have and remove themselves from your website custom audiences. It's also the good thing with this as well is that if people want to be removed from certain parts or certain audiences and they can see all of that privacy data, then they've got to go directly to Facebook or Google to be able to do that. The only reason they'll come to you to remove their data is if you've got email information or contact information that you're sending them data via another processor elsewhere. So, installing cookie notice on your website. Step number 2. Third step, you need to sync your data custom audiences. So before, when I was saying if you use email lists and you upload them to custom audiences and then you target them with advertising, then people need to have the right to be forgotten. So people should be able to basically say I don't want to be on your email list anymore, and then you technically need to remove them from your synced data custom audience. Now, if you've got if you've got a big list and people are unsubscribing all the time, obviously having to go back and forth and do that is really time consuming. So there are a few programs that will help you do that and automate the process. So the first one is if you've ever gone into upload a data custom audience, actually lets you connect MailChimp. MailChimp are the only company that have a direct connection to the Facebook data custom audience. So MailChimp, you just log into your account and you can sync some audiences, and then when they unsubscribe from that list, they'll be removed from the Facebook audience as well. Another one that has been released recently is by ActiveCampaign. They've got a similar thing where you actually integrate your Facebook advertising campaign with your ActiveCampaign account, and then it will do the same process as well. If you have anything other that will use data from any other kind of third-party provider, and then there's one that actually has, I think it's about over 50 different apps, and it's most likely probably got your email provider in it, but it's called Connect Audience. Works exactly the same principle, syncs with over 50 different CRM solutions and automatically updates it for it. So that's step number 3. I know we're really getting into the depths of things here in the GDPR, but 4 key steps. We're up to number 4. This is the last one, and probably the most urgent for a lot of the businesses out there, which is you need to check if you need to actually go back out to your list and check if you need to get fresh consent before May 25th. So this has been a really big contentious issue with people. Knowing that they need to ask those people to opt in again to their email list or to whatever information you're sending them. The reason why this has come about is basically if you're emailing people after May 25th, they need to have given you explicit consent to be able to do that. And generally, for most people, when they first got that data before May 25, they probably didn't get it at the level of regulations that GDPR requires. So that means if you for businesses that I'll deal with businesses outside of EU because that's probably most of the people that are watching outside of the EU. You only need to email people that you can identify in the EU. If you're not sure what country they're from, then they need to actually go into that bucket as well to be able to email to say you need to come up with a campaign to basically a juicy carrot to say, hey, thanks so much for opting in, back when you did, but we're just updating our privacy policies and we just want to make sure that you still want to hear from us. If you click the link and confirm that you're interested in hearing from us, we'll continue to send you emails. Otherwise, after May 25, we won't be able to. So if you're a business outside of the EU, you need to take those steps. If you're a business inside the EU, then you need to email everyone. So if you've got a business that's located in there, all of this applies to you regardless. So that's probably the most what's the word I'm looking for? Urgent step that you need to take between now and the 25th. You've got 9 days to basically try and get those people to opt in again if they're still interested in hearing from you. So that's step number 4, and I'm going to go into some. Let me just check some comments as well while this is loading, but going to go into some tools, resources, and maybe common questions that you've got as well. How are we tracking? Alright, I think there's a few questions in. I'm not sure whether I might have been cutting in and out a little bit, but I'm not sure whether that's my internet connection. If not, I'll upload this after the fact as well. Alright, tools, resources, common questions. I've got links to some official legal counsel if you're wanting to get some advice, official legal advice. Then Pod Legal, some people that have been recommended to me. Full transparency, I haven't dealt with them before. I haven't had the need to go into a legal side of things, but they are Australian based and they are very good by all reports. If you're looking to get a nice succinct summary of what the GDPR is about, then there's a good infographic here by the EU Commission as well. Some boring Facebook product terms and privacy principles and GDPR principles if you enjoy reading that kind of stuff. If you want to see what other business owners are doing, I really recommend this Facebook group. It's called the GDPR for Online Entrepreneurs. I think it's probably over 25,000 now. And there's people asking all different types of questions. If you've thought of a scenario, someone in there has probably asked it. It's run by a lady called Suzanne Dibble. She also has a good checklist that you can pay for and a complete kit that you can download and make sure you cover all bases in there as well. I've been doing a lot of research. I've listened to quite a few podcast episodes. These are probably my favourites, with a couple with that Suzanne Dibble that I mentioned in the group, and another one with Amy Porterfield on her podcast as well. Here's links to those tools to be able to install a privacy and cookie policy as well, and some commonly asked questions that maybe you would have. Probably the first one, or probably not the first one. Doesn't apply to people in the UK as well, is one that I have got before, is because they're Brexiting, and they haven't Brexited yet, but it is happening in March 2019. So currently, it does apply to people in the UK, and by the time the UK Brexits the EU in March of 2019, they will have a policy that closely mirrors that for their own, for the UK as well, and it'll basically be exactly the same, so nothing will really change. It'll just be status quo. So yes, it does affect people in the UK. What are the penalties for not abiding by it? There's been plenty of coverage, obviously, about if you don't abide by it, you get a 20 million euro fine for not complying, or 4% of your global revenue, whichever is greater. There's been some threats on that. Look, makes a good headline. There are plenty of steps before then, though. Firstly, the steps that you would get cut or you would be affected by. Firstly, there's a warning and there's a reprimand. If you don't get the hint by then you may be suspended from collecting personal data as well. If you're still going against the regulations and doing stuff that you shouldn't be, then you'll be fined 20 million euro, which, if it gets to that point, honestly, you probably deserve to be fined 20 million euro. So another question, and this isn't legal advice again, but what is the likelihood of me being caught? Not going to give advice if you don't go against it. There are a couple of things to consider to make a more educated decision. For starters, there's not like a GDPR police roaming the internet wanting to check whether websites are GDPR compliant. It's just not there. Most of the investigations will come, particularly for smaller based businesses, will come about as people reporting them to the EU Commission. The key to the GDPR is giving the consumer more control over their online data. So it's not just the law that has the power, but it's also the consumers as well. And that's a really key thing to remember, that if you've got a disgruntled customer, more savvy customers, if you've got a naughty competitor, then they can technically report you and put you under investigation to the EU Commission as well. But I like to think of it as, if I don't do it, then like if I was to compare me to the next audience, the next company rather next to me, and I'm transparent on my website as to how I use your data, what I do with it, and then they compare me to the one next door that offers exactly the same services and they aren't transparent and they don't say that we're going to use this data. For me, I've got that competitive advantage, and I'm probably more likely to have a little bit more trust from that customer as well. So I think it's more of a business-minded and competitive edge kind of decision to implement it as well. The other one, which I covered at the start of the Facebook Live, was, does it apply to me if majority of my customers are outside the EU? Yes, it does. There are two parts to this answer. Obviously, the law says it applies if you're processing record of anyone in the EU. Like we said before, the commercial risk is that there's no GDPR police checking every single website, but they will be generally notified by complaints from the general public or sneaky competitors as well. Another one I've been asked as well is, can people choose not to see ads from my business on Facebook and Instagram? So Mark Zuckerberg has gone on and said, we're going to give more people control over their privacy, and you've probably seen notifications on your own personal newsfeed as well to say you can adjust your settings here. As part of the new Facebook product terms, they have introduced a setting that allows people to be removed from your custom audiences. When you go to clear that data though, they're actually pretty transparent, Facebook, that says, look, you can remove yourself and you can stop these websites from tracking you and using you in custom audiences, but that won't stop you from seeing ads on the platform. You'll still see just as many ads, if not more. No, you won't see more. You'll still see just as many ads, but they won't be relevant to you. That's basically Facebook and Instagram's terms of service. If you want to use their free platform, you agree that you're okay to be served ads. If you want to be served relevant ads, then you can choose to be part of these custom audiences. If you want to be served junk, then you can opt out. Pretty simple. So they're pretty transparent with that. And because it's a manual process that people go through, history tells us that if Facebook give you the option, that's all really Facebook have done, is just to cover their bases. But generally a lot of people actually won't. And they don't actually go through the steps to do it. So they're just saying, yes, you've got the control now, but that's about it. So that's some common questions. I'm sure that I've missed something. And if you're watching this after the fact, then you can leave the comments in there. Miles, thank you. Ainsley, appreciate you jumping on board as well. See me to check it. Yeah, I wouldn't actually, I thought of offering this as a service, but honestly, it would be too convoluted to, and too much of a legal risk to do. So I'd certainly recommend going and seeking legal counsel for your business, particularly if you've got, you're processing some really sensitive data as well. You need to make sure that you're covered. And if you've got customers in the EU, this is super critical to your business, and don't think that this isn't going to be implemented around the world sooner rather than later. If I'm the US and I'm looking at what the EU are doing from a privacy and data collection steps and process and implementing this, then I'm probably going to be implementing it sooner rather than later to my own country as well. So I'd say that US will follow, Australia and New Zealand won't be far behind. I'm certain of that as well. But this is just the world that we live in now. So adjust and move to it and implement it, you may as well get a head start on it now and get your head around it, as opposed to having to freak out and maybe technically going against those regulations down the track as well. So I'm going to put a link to this blog post once it's finally published, and I've got the technical issues over in the comments, which you can go through and check out all of those resources as well. If you've got any questions, leave them there. If I don't know the answer, I'll point you in the right direction. I certainly don't profess to know it all, and that's why I only wanted to cover the marketing aspect of the GDPR. There's a lot more technicalities in it that you need to consider as well. But that's today's Facebook Live. I appreciate people that have jumped on board. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you can see me. I'm not sure whether it actually all worked from the sound and aspect side of things, but if it did, awesome. But otherwise, I'll chat to you soon. All right, bye.